Welcome to Gone to Texas, a podcast about AMC's Preacher. My name is Alex, and I have not read any of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
My name is Nick, and I have read all of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
And my name is Lance, and I have read all of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
My name's John. I've read none of Garth Ennis's Preacher, but Nick spoiled a lot of it for me.
And put on at your request.
I did say go ahead and spoil it.
Yeah, this is true.
I just clued him in on a couple key scenes.
It made me want to read the books.
Well, and we got to let Nick talk about it somewhere since he can't.
Off the show.
Yeah, he can't do
Right.
it on the show. But anyway, today we will be discussing all of Season 1 of the show, and while we will not be spoiling any of the comic book and by extension any future plot lines of the show, we will be discussing details of the first season of the series. So pause this, go watch the whole season before you listen to the rest of this episode. You can find more of our episodes at g2tpodcast.com. That's the letter G, number 2, letter T, podcast.com. We're also G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can send feedback to g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and to share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on air. Send us corrections, observations, and anything regarding Preacher or our podcast. So, Season 1 of Preacher wrapped up last week. We've had about a week to digest at this point. I figured we could just start with some preliminary thoughts of how you felt about the season. Nick, what did you think of Season 1 of Preacher?
I liked it.
Did it do it for you?
It's not the wrong show.
Oh, okay.
I do like that the opening of our show is these pretzels are making me thirsty from Seinfeld, basically. Like I was listening to the way we all would change the inflection of what we were saying. It's kind of funny. Yeah, it's good. It's it definitely. I don't know what I expected, I guess, is the perfect lead into this. I was wary. It was Preacher was a property that over the years, as they continually said, oh, so-and-so is developing it now. And I always knew it was one of those like lauded comic series that everyone always says, oh my God, it's like one of the best. And I had not read it all those years ago when they were talking about like Mark Steven Johnson. Is that his name?
Yep.
Yeah. And company doing it, and I was kind of like, well, he sucks, so maybe that's not good, but whatever. And it's one of those series that it's so praised that even when I hadn't read it, and other people were bummed out about the people that were adapting it, I felt sad too, because I was like, I feel like this is an important work, and if it's not given the
proper
the care that it needs and the right and the right creative team behind it, then I'm going to be sad for all those fans. And so going into it after having read it and then, hearing that Seth Rogen and everybody was developing it and then starting to follow the production a little bit, what little bit I could, because they kept most of it. They did a really great job keeping it under wraps. But it's also because it wasn't really in the spotlight. It really did a great job. After the pilot, I was a little, and I really want to go back and listen to all of our old episodes and see how we feel and how we receive certain things. But the pilot, I remember not feeling great when it was over because I didn't feel bad, but I just felt lost because I went into it thinking I was going to have this like more informed experience, which is not necessarily good or bad, but at least that's what I was expecting to do. And then the fact that it deviated immediately from where the book starts, I was like, oh, okay, we're either in for something really cool and interesting or something awful that is unnecessary.
You were unaware, and I don't know how much this was out there, if it was just something that we missed, but you were unaware of the idea that this would be issue 0 or like season 0.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
And apparently, according to Rogen and Goldberg, they said that. They said that the season was going to end where the book starts, and I had never read that or heard that actually until after the finale.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
So I was like, I'm glad I didn't though, because if I had known that, and I was about halfway through this season, I started to anticipate that we were going to get there by the finale, but I wasn't sure. And had I known that, had I had that landmark, in my vision, but throughout the whole series, I probably would have not stopped to smell the roses so much and enjoy what I was seeing. So, or the tulips, as it were. So overall, I did really like it. I think it's a really cool entry into the Preacher canon. I think it's a really interesting and clever and probably essential way to adapt it and to usher in those new viewers / a new audience to Preacher, because like Rogen and Goldberg say, they did this season not for the fans of the comic so much as easing people into it.
Yeah.
And I like that he even Seth Rogen even acknowledged. He said, "If I was a fan, I'd be upset from time to time. Like, why is it taking so long to get to this and this and this?" He goes, "I understand your frustrations." He's like, "But trust me, we're there now, and we can't wait to get to it." Basically. And he made a great parallel with Game of Thrones. He was like, they had to like lay out characters first. He goes, if you got right to dragons and zombies and voodoo stuff, magic, he was like, you would not have the runaway show you have today.
Well, you've ruined Game of Thrones for me now.
He goes, once you get people comfortable, then you can introduce radical ideas to them, and they'll be more receptive to it. So I get it, and I just happen to also have liked the season, so that's good. I think for people that didn't like the season but are fans of the book, maybe they'll come back for season 2 and give it another shot, or maybe they're just checked out.
I wonder how much of you being okay with this season was in part due to the fact that like we watched it together and kind of talked about it and hashed it out. Maybe you would have, and probably not, because you're generally pretty open-minded about taking out like all the good that you can in something when you see
wait
it.
for our Suicide Squad review.
But maybe if you were watching it alone and didn't really have anybody to talk about with
Forever
it,
alone watching Preacher.
Yeah, maybe it would have.
That's an interesting thought, and obviously, I love talking movies and media. If I can sit and hash it out with people, it's like one of my favorite things to do. And so sometimes being able to watch something knowing you're talking about it later, like you said, it makes you think a little more critically. And I definitely sunk my teeth into Preacher a little more than I would have another show, I think, because I care about the source material, and the adaptation is so different that I found myself trying to not necessarily figure out what was going on, but just like kind of relearn the characters in the story in like a new context. So it was a fun, I don't want to say challenge, but it was kind of a fun project to watch it and kind of keep an open mind. And I've talked to a friend who, well, very, very briefly about whether or not he liked the series, and I asked him, "Have you been watching?" And he went, and I said, "Okay, like I got it." And he was like, "All right, does that answer your question pretty much?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." But I do want to get more in depth with him and find out why he's so opposed to it. Yeah, because it's one of those things where I think if you had adapted it directly from page to screen, it would probably, I don't want to say it would be boring, but it kind of maybe would. I think you'd be less satisfied even so if they didn't like
as a fan of it,
right?
Yeah.
Like if they were gonna adapt it from page to screen and start at issue 1, I don't think I would have liked Dominic Cooper as much as Jesse Custer. Yeah. But now that I've seen this other side and the things he was able to bring to the role, I like it more. Like before, it was either like Bernthal or McConaughey or bust for Jesse Custer, and I would have just been looking at Dominic Cooper going, well, why? But anyway, I do like it a lot. I think it was a lot of fun to watch. I'm glad it succeeded. I'm glad that it's got a season 2, and I'm glad that it seems like the average television watcher kind of latched onto it in some way. I think that's cool. Whether or not they have been satisfied with the fact that the whole town blew up at the end and everyone's dead except for those 3, I don't know. I actually haven't really plumbed the internet to see what the reception is to that. But I think I thought it was an interesting choice. Yeah. And kind of, again, a necessary one. Like, they're doing things that they feel like they need to do, and I think I kind of appreciate that. That they're not afraid to take these big swinging risks and see what happens. It's cool, and that's the way Preacher should be. Preacher's bold, and it's original, and it's a little fearless, and, to play it safe would not do it justice. All right.
Lance, what did you think of season 1 of Preacher?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Having read the comics, I feel like
having also read all
of Garth Ennis's Preacher, they did a good job. They covered a lot of ground, actually. If you think about it, they covered about 2 story arcs, I'd say.
They do front end a lot of material from later in the series.
Yeah,
they do move a lot of it up into this season, so that is pretty cool. They're able to lay a lot of groundwork that doesn't necessarily happen until later in the books.
Right,
it's cool.
Yeah. Season 2, I don't know what to expect because as Fior and DeBlanc, they left their comics behind. It's kind of like how we're doing that. Right. I mean, I know we're going to meet some certain characters that have been hinted to in the first season, which is going to be awesome. Yeah. It's going to be really good. And
Lance and I have been texting and privately fan casting some of the upcoming characters. We're both pretty excited.
Yep, at least 3 of them.
Any of our suggestions are great, so hack into our text.
Since we work with AMC.
We are an official AMC.
Yeah, as that one guy thought.
That is a joke. We are not an official AMC podcast.
No, we are not.
But we'd love to be.
Let us know. But yeah.
You can send the funding checks to Alex.
Yep.
To Alex.
Just to Alex.
Yeah, just write Alex on it. Put it in the mail.
The bank will sort it out.
Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah. So what I think about a lot is what came before the show, where I saw this Comic-Con, South by Southwest interview with a lot of the cast and the creators, and Sam Catlin was like, "Give us time." You know, that's like the one thing he said was like, "Give us time." You know, and I'm glad I did.
We'll get there.
Yeah, he's like, "We'll get there, guys." He's like, the comic starts at 200 miles per hour and goes to 300 miles per hour, which is really true.
It's true.
Yeah. So I'm glad that I gave it time. I'm glad that I spent time with it. And yeah, I enjoyed the ride. I like what they did with Tulip. I don't know if I liked the reactions that people had to Tulip in the beginning, because Tulip wasn't that developed in the comics. I mean, she was kind of like, she had her own thing going on, but it was pretty much dependent on Jesse. So giving Tulip a little freedom to do her own thing, be her own kind of person, was cool.
Very true.
Then Cassidy, perfect casting for sure, just amazing,
Flawless. Yeah.
Yep.
Couldn't be better.
Yep. And Dominic Cooper, he's not the Jesse from the comics. I don't think so.
I don't think he's going to be either.
No,
They kind of made it sound like in the Insider podcast that he was going to get there ish, but I was like, no, he's already got too much. He's too developed already.
right. He's a more sensitive kind of indecisive kind of guy in the comics, I'd say. Whereas, in the TV show, whereas in the comics, he's like, I'm gonna do this thing. You know, like he's very much like that kind of like John Wayne.
Yes. Yeah. He's almost not even a character. He's almost more of like a just kind of a force.
Yeah.
You instantly. He's like the Saint of Killers, where when you know immediately how he's going to react to something. Whereas like other characters who are a little more complex, you might not know how they're going to receive a certain situation or what decision they might make. But like you know what Jesse's going to do. Mm-hmm. He's one of those characters that just like you predict his behavior, which isn't necessarily bad. He's still a really good character. He's just he's one of those like. He's actually, he's a lot like Dominic Cooper in Need for Speed, except the opposite. Because Need for Speed has the purest pure good guy character and the baddest bad guy character. And Dominic Cooper plays the bad guy, and Aaron Paul is the good guy. And have you seen Need for Speed?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's so great. And they're like cartoon characters. They're like, it's like Space Ghost and like Skeletor. Like they're just or He-Man and Skeletor, I guess would be more appropriate. The one is really pure good and the other one's just pure bad. And that's kind of the way that they are in the books, or that Jesse is in the books. You just instantly, you're like, okay, Jesse's never going to waver. He's never going to buckle. He's never going to bend. He can't be corrupted. He can't be bought. Whereas in the show, he's more susceptible to outside influence.
Yes.
Or to himself. His own
right.
compass.
Who he thinks he is.
Sometimes spinning.
Yeah. And last thing I want to say is just Eugene. That's all I want to say.
Yeah.
All
right, John, what'd you think of season 1?
All right, so as someone who has not read the comics, I really enjoyed the fact that I got a ton of backstory, because I feel like after learning that the way the comic starts off, I would have hated not knowing where these people came from and why they're in the situation they're in. So I'm kind of glad at the direction the show took with this, like giving us that, episode 0 or like, season 0 or however you want to address it.
Yeah.
I like that, because otherwise, like, I wouldn't know, and I don't know how much backstory they wanted to have to go in later on, or if they were just going to like go into it, 1,000 miles an hour. I thought it was a great show though, and I honestly, like, I probably never would have started watching it had you guys not asked me to fill in. Alex asked me to fill in to host, just because 1, I don't have cable, and 2, I just don't watch a ton of TV, like actual television shows on TV. I watch a lot of Netflix. It's not really my thing. I like to binge because I'm a loser. That's what I do. So for me, Alex asked me to host a couple episodes. I think episode 4 and 5.
Yeah.
So there were 5 episodes that I could binge like right off the bat, which was great. Like I loved it, and then I had to wait, and then I was like, "This is dumb." And so then I waited until the end, and Alex was like, "Hey, I need you to fill in another episode." And I was like, "Sweet, I get to watch like 3 more." So I downloaded 3. I'm sorry, procured them legally by legal means, and watched them on a television. With an HDMI cable, and I got to binge 3 more episodes, and it was awesome. And then finally, the final episode hits, and I get to watch that, and now I'm here, and like I can talk about all of them. Like, this show, it's done really well. The pacing I thought was really, really good. I thought the characters were super interesting. I think everyone who's acting in the show is fantastic. That's really all I need to say about it. I think anybody who isn't watching the show is making a big mistake. And I've tried to tell more of my friends, like, if you're not watching it, please pick it up. And I even have friends who have read the comics who are like, I don't know if I want to touch it. And I'm like, dude, like, do it. Like, you will love it. People that I know that read the comics and watched the show love it. You will love this. So hopefully I'll have more people to talk to about it, because currently I just have you guys.
Yeah, and then you can tell them maybe they need to watch it and listen to our show, and we'll make them like it too. Even if they don't.
I mean, and they can come and talk about it with us or something. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Like, there are many opportunities to talk about the show at that point, but we need to get there. We need more people to watch it. And I mean, obviously they got season 2 coming, so they had enough of an audience to garner that, which is great.
Yeah, I think I remember reading that the numbers kind of ticked up towards the end of the season as things got a little more crazy and bombastic. So I'm hoping that means that they're going to lead off season 2 pretty strong.
Well, that's the thing. I don't even think the series started that slow. And I mean, maybe that's just because I had the actual opportunity to binge it. Like, I don't know, like, which is entirely possible. But even just the first episode, like, I watched the first episode and I was like, oh, I can't wait to watch the next one. You know what I mean? Like, and I didn't, like, I was like, that got me, like, right off the bat. It wasn't a matter of like, okay, like, at what point is this going to hit me? Like, Stranger Things, like, took a little bit. I don't know. Like, I thought it took me about 3 episodes of Stranger Things before I was really hooked. But by that point, I was so hooked. Yeah. It was bad. Yeah. Like, but that's again a different show. But it's like this one right off the bat, I was hooked. Like,
I think it helped that it was like 80-minute episode. That first episode gave you a lot to kind of chew on.
Sure.
So much so that even afterwards, Nick and I were kind of like, these episodes feel too short. We want more to happen. But
well, and it also helps for me too. Like, I like the subject matter. Like, I like dissecting religion in ways, and I think this is an interesting way to do it. Through the means of a comic book / TV show in a slightly comedic yet accessible manner. Like, I like that. So the subject matter alone is enough to kind of hook me in a bit, and then to have it so well done just puts it on the next level.
Yeah.
And it's something different too. It's something
totally.
It's something very different, and it's dense, and it's layered. There's just a lot going on. It's like
Cassidy doesn't sparkle.
You can,
There's no werewolves yet that I know of.
It's like the old like food or drink analogy. I mean, you can drink just a good Pilsner 5 nights a week, or maybe you don't drink beer that much. Most of us probably don't, but you can have your regular standby type thing that's easily digestible and that you like and you know what to expect, and you can try something new, like something that's different and more complex and requires you to think a little bit more and
like
cherish
absinthe.
the experience. Yes, exactly.
Like
haunt your dreams and change your perception of
absinthe
reality.
is in the comic, isn't it?
Absinthe?
Yeah, doesn't he? What the thing with the? I'll talk.
Yeah, no spoilers.
All I know is I've had a serious amount of absinthe before, and it's never really done anything except make me want to throw up.
Yeah.
So,
stays in your DNA, bro.
I really liked Preacher season 1.
Yeah, what did you think?
One of the things
now
that
to
Nick,
Alex.
If you go back to the Preacher primer, which was the first episode that we put on this feed before episode 1, Nick says something about his concern about the trailer, about how this show is about it's got angels and vampires and blah blah and all this stuff, and the trailer showed none of it. And I really like that. The show is really unassuming on its face.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's got so much depth behind it and so much high concept to it but it feels like a plain old town in Texas in a lot of ways. I think that's a really interesting duality, and I think they pulled that off really well, and which is a credit to Garth Ennis, I'm sure, and it's also a credit to these guys to kind of bring this world to life. But really, I mean, there wasn't much that I didn't like about this show. Really, the only thing that I didn't like, I think, Dominic Cooper's Jesse Custer flips a switch in the last episode or two that we talked about a little bit. Is really the only thing like that the pilot, or not the pilot, the finale feels like it needs to put a big bow on things, and it definitely does that, but it does that by way of some sloppy writing. So I wish that they would have distributed things a little more evenly across the 10 episodes to get us there in a more logical and natural fashion. But really, that's just kind of like a pacing thing. That's like a slider that I feel like you could switch. But the rest of the show, I mean, I love the characters. And even though I love them, a question that I was going to ask you guys is, was it worth it to kill all of them? And I think it was.
Yes.
We'll see what season 2's like, but I think it was as of right now. And I think it's definitely something people should keep an eye on. I'm hoping it gets, AMC shows are kind of weird, especially unless you're The Walking Dead. Something like Breaking Bad and Mad Men start to gain more every time it comes out on DVD in between the seasons. And so I'm hoping Preacher does the same thing. But Nick, were you going to say something?
Just about what you said about whether or not it was
worth
it to kill all the characters, and I could talk more about that once you're done with it.
Okay. Well, no, I mean,
because I'll forget.
That was generally it, but we will ask that question in a second. Something I did notice, I was on the Preacher subreddit on reddit.com, and they had a season discussion topic up there. And user Michelle5546 said, just started rewatch already with my boyfriend, his first viewing, and I found it very interesting that Genesis sounds like a baby flying around in space, so much so that he even called it the space baby, her boyfriend, I guess. And that first scene with Arseface when he says he used to hear God answer his prayers, but he hasn't heard him lately.
Yes.
I can't wait to watch the rest and catch all these wonderful things. I thought that was really cool, and it makes me want to go back and watch season 1 again.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be a great rewatch.
There's got to be little bits and pieces all over the place to pick up.
Yeah. Seth Rogen confirmed that on Talking Preacher, that like all the departments, art department, scripts, all that, they
everybody
kind of drop little Easter eggs everywhere. So I thought that was kind of cool.
I want to go back again and look at all of the signs on the church, like all the letters, because there's red letters on all of them, and I want to know what that means.
Somebody on the subreddit was compiling them.
Okay,
but I haven't seen a thing from them lately, so I can't remember where it was. But
it probably just spells like.
Well, seeing as how Sam Catlin comes from a show like Breaking Bad.
Sam Catlin come from.
It comes from a show like Breaking Bad where they were doing things like the first or these specific episode titles spell what happens in the season and all that kinds of crazy stuff. I could see that being something like you could unscrabble these letters. Yeah. Maybe it just says, I don't know.
Balls.
Yeah, something like that. But I wouldn't put that past Seth Rogen.
Something like shit lake under town or something like that.
That's got to be it. But
town is poo bomb.
And to toot my own horn again for I think the second week in a row, I think Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg confirmed on the Insider podcast my theory about Genesis and Jesse, how it selected Jesse because he's more of a duality of good and evil. Whereas the first priest that he hits in Africa is pure good, and then he goes to a satanic cult,
right?
And that person's too terrible. So then it keeps obviously going through people like Tom Cruise, and I don't know what he is, if he's good or bad, but but then it gets to Jesse, and Jesse's got the good and the bad inside him to kind of match what Genesis is. I think they basically confirmed that, so I'm happy with it. But yeah. John, what are you looking at?
The stealthy ninja cat that I've never seen in my life has appeared.
Desmond the Invisible Cat. But
huge cat.
Let's talk about that question. Was it worth to build up all these characters just to kill them off? Nick, what are your thoughts?
I like it purely from just the balls, like the balls it takes to do that. I think that I appreciate that. Like I think sometimes in fiction, you got to be willing to wipe out those characters in order to remind us of the stakes and to enjoy, characters while we have them. There's obviously a lot of fiction that we like, where characters get wiped out somewhat unexpectedly, and it's well documented on the other podcasts that I was rooting for the end of The Dark Knight Rises to be a bloodbath, but it wasn't. I was really disappointed, and I was surprised. I was actually genuinely surprised, because not only do they spend so much time with the characters, but they're all good. They're all good characters, and they're not all bad people. Like in the book, so we can talk a little bit about the book now, right? Because the way, at least how the book starts, because now we're there. And in the beginning, I won't tell anything that ruins anything else, but in the beginning of the comic, Jesse doesn't like anybody in Anvil. And I think by the end of the series,
because the church exploded.
Yeah, but pretty much the whole town's in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because he has a public outburst at the bar and gets into some fights with people, and he just kind of
calls them on their crap.
Yes, it's kind of the same way in the series, where the town is full of a lot of bad people, and he's still trying to be a good shepherd to his flock, as fake God tells him. And he's still trying to Fod the Almighty, and he's still trying, but he's not quite at that point yet, his breaking point, where he's like, there's no saving these people, or at least there's no explanation for why people can be so bad.
Yeah.
And in the book, he has this outburst and gets kind of beat up, and it causes this scene, and it's a disruption in the normal flow, because it's kind of, in the comic, when you meet Jesse, his congregation is kind of like at the beginning of the series, where there's not many people there. Church is just kind of this like snooze fest that 20 people show up to out of some obligation, and then they leave. But then after his scene at the bar, he causes the church is like packed, and like people want to see what's going on. And then Genesis,
who's he going to call out this week,
right? Or what wacky thing is he going to do? And then Genesis flies into him, and the church explodes, and it kills like everybody. Not everybody in the town. There's still a few people around, but it's like a big deal. And that's what draws the attention of many forces in the Preacher lexicon, which we have yet to meet. Well, Lance knows a little bit about some of the people we've crossed paths with.
We met one person that you saw the back of his head,
and there are more that are going to spin out of that. And obviously, Saint of Killers is now on the scene, and he's going to do some stuff. But so in the book, like in the way Cassidy meets, he just like, I actually forgot again how Cassidy and Jesse meet, because I know he meets Tulip,
the ruins of the church.
Oh, right.
They kind of roll up
because he's driving.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Cassidy meets Tulip first,
Yep.
and then they all happen to be passing through Anvil, essentially, and they all link up. And their meeting is very brief. It's almost like they said at the end of the Insider podcast. By the time you finish the first issue or two, you've already seen pretty much everything that the show established. But because it's a different medium, and like Seth Rogen says, people who read comics, you already have this tendency to accept more unbelievable things. Like, because if you read comic books, you're willing to be like, okay, a vampire got hit by a car. Your suspension of
disbelief is
exactly.
Is
you're
automatically...
you're willing to be more along for the ride for a while and accept crazy big things. Because by the end of the first issue, you've met all these people. The plot is explained to you. Cassidy and Jesse meet over the course of a page, like 6 panels, and then you're in. You're like, okay, I get it. Like, I get why they're friends. And in a series in live action, it just takes a little more time.
Yeah.
But that's about it. Like, there's not a lot that's happened in the comic that can be spoiled at this point. You know what I mean? Aside from some of the things that came later, like Odin and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But even he was woven into the fabric of this show differently than he is in the books, and it was great. I think it was definitely a move for the betterment.
Really good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's like one of those things where...
So that was another question that I was going to have specifically for you guys. Are you disappointed that Odin isn't going to happen to a T that he does later in the books?
No, because that role can be filled by an original character, or there are even characters in the books that can fill that role, or they can just do away with that subplot altogether. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's a cool arc. I really like it. I like that. I like that kind of, again, like John Wayne's story of like a guy wandering into a town that needs some justice, and then dealing out justice and helping out the poor, beaten, downtrodden people of the town.
Yeah, and that was a cool town too. Salvation, the people he meets.
And there's a cool story between Jesse and like the deputy and the sheriff.
Yep.
And there's just a nice interaction, and it's kind of a weird it's kind of a weird aside to the rest of the story. And we can't really say anything else without spoiling anything else. But it almost reads like a sidequel, kind of, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And if they ever get to it, we'll talk more about it. Or whenever Preacher the series is said and done with a bow on it, if you ever end up reading the books,
Yeah.
or John, then we could talk a little bit more about it. Or we can just spoil it for John in like half an hour when we're done with this episode, because he's
Yep.
game.
Oh yeah.
But it's I think to go TLDR your question, I think it was necessary to get Jesse and Cassidy and Tulip in the car and on their way. The only thing I wish that everyone in the town had been left on a really bad note with Jesse, because he just kind of seems, and again, it's one of those switch flips. There are still people in the town that I think he cares about,
Yeah.
or at least feels sympathetic towards. Whereas in the comic, Jesse's like, screw him. You know, he's like,
Yeah.
whatever, no great loss. But in the series, he leaves church just because he wants some French fries, and then like the town blows up.
Yeah, it feels weird that maybe we'll never get, like, what's his reaction to Emily being
Like
blown
Emily or
apart?
even the sheriff. Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't hate the sheriff, and he knows there's innocent people in the town, and some of them they may do or say bad things, but inherently they're not evil. There's even like boys who were trying to be nice to Eugene, and they're gone.
Yeah.
I do love what you mentioned, and I don't know if we were recording or on the air, but that Eugene is essentially going to sub in the John Wayne
Yeah.
role, sort of.
In the comic, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty clever and seems likely,
Yeah.
and it's real sad, actually.
Lance,
Yes.
what do you feel about everybody dying? Good move, bad move?
Oh, it's a good move for the book because they got to go on the road.
Yeah.
Is it a good move for the TV show? Yeah, that too, because I mean, you just start off on a new adventure, and but now they've got a lot of pressure. Pressure's on, I'd say. So yeah, I do. Now that you mention it, I do think like, yeah, why did Jesse not feel anything towards all the people dying?
Well, and I
Maybe
think
he
it's
doesn't
just,
know.
He
No, of
doesn't.
course he knows.
doesn't. I don't think he knows.
It was
yet.
on the TV in the
It's
diner.
on the TV as
Yeah.
he walks out.
Oh, okay.
So he might.
Yeah.
I don't think they're aware that
Yeah.
Anvil has exploded. I don't know how
Yeah.
they got that far away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
that was another
quickly.
thing where I was like,
It's kind of like, why did they drive 2 hours to get French fries? But,
Yeah. Right.
but so
Yeah.
I think we could see some kind of reaction, but it
Okay.
feels like one of those things that they would just not
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
at this. I don't know.
and they
Right.
could have even played it off. I mean, like literally, they could have been paying the check and then show that on the news, and you could have even seen Cassidy and Tulip turn to Jesse like, "Oh God,"
Yeah.
and him just go,
Yeah.
"Huh."
That's very Breaking Bad of them to start the next season like seconds after the last one.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. That
Yeah,
could-
it may open on
that
him.
maybe it opens on them turning on the radio,
Yeah.
and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, Anvil
They
exploded."
may even drive back to Anvil
To see who survived.
and then we might get a little bit of
Uh-huh.
Uh,
for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, all right.
maybe.
But
Yeah,
yeah, we did get close to a lot of those characters. Emily, I would say we got close to. Sheriff Root, I mean, I even felt for the
Yeah.
guy, because he even felt remorseful about, what happened to Eugene. And there was even talk of like, I kind of sympathized with him because like he loves Eugene, but at the same time, Eugene is the source of a lot of his problems.
yeah,
So that adds a little more depth to him. And Quincannon, I mean, what they did with him in the show kind of is like it's an example of what everyone goes through with God, like
yeah.
why did this happen to me? Or why do good things happen to bad people? I mean,
Yep.
excuse me. Why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah.
That's the one. So,
Well,
and then-
sometimes good things do happen to bad people.
yes, that too. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's the other side of the coin.
Absolutely, yeah. So, yeah. Is Fior still around? I don't know. Was he in?
Fior made it out.
He made it out.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
got off the
Yeah.
bus.
He got off the bus
and-
after it exploded,
Right.
after
And
everything
his
exploded.
And
his
LeBlanc
comics were
is-
still there.
Yeah,
I think
right.
LeBlanc is toast.
Which is kind of funny, them saying we're back to the comics, maybe.
we just took a little detour.
Took a little detour.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but-
that's kind of funny. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
But no, you had to kill everybody.
Yeah.
You had to.
John, what did you think? As somebody who hasn't read the comic, what do you think about them killing everybody whose name is in the main credits, except for the three?
I mean, it could be budgetary. That could be how they got that second season, was getting rid of the entire cast.
We're up Game of Thrones.
Right? I don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure what to think about. I mean, it definitely crossed my mind. I'm like, okay, like, so Emily gets killed off. Like, she's not that bad of a person, but she is, because she
killed Miles.
Right. But her kids, like, what did they do? They're kids. They're innocent. They've done nothing wrong. You know, like, that kind of sucks. That's kind of a huge bummer. Unless, like, her having that conversation with them, like, telling them, like, okay, like, it's okay to not believe anymore, or whatever the whole conversation. I can't really remember because my comprehension's awful.
How they never needed God.
Yeah, you don't really need him anyways. Like, you can go without him, and like maybe like losing your faith like that is grounds enough for God to torch your entire town. I don't really know. The question I have to this is, you know, is this explosion an act of God at some, you know, on some level, or is it not? Is it just coincidence and going to be blamed on a lack of God? Like, that's doing this basically, like, this, the act of killing everyone off has left me with more questions more than it's given me any kind of clarity as to like whether or not it's good or bad.
Interesting. Well, I think it's, as Nick said, it's very bold, and I think it's very interesting. It makes me very excited to see what season 2 is going to be, because at this point it's a completely different show. Like, unless it's just the three of them interacting with each other the whole time. Which
they did lay down some clues in the Insider podcast as to what season 2 is going to be.
Okay.
They had said they haven't written it yet, I don't think. But they've got they kind of, I think, have a grand structure of what it's going to be.
Yeah. So
it's going to be different.
Yeah. So and I'm excited to see that difference. It's not that often where you see a show eschew its whole milieu in that first season and go on to something totally different in season 2.
Eschew milieu, is that going to be your rap group?
It's my rapper name. Yeah. But no, I'm excited to see what's next, and I think killing everybody helps make that excitement even higher.
Yeah, I think if anything, it should build anticipation for people who don't know what's coming, because they should say, "Whoa, like, what is in store?"
Exactly. I have no idea what comes after this, really.
I actually don't either. I mean, I do, but I know the potential avenues of you know, that they could go down, but there's a lot of options, and there's a lot of blending of characters they could do. They could blend some plot, some arcs, and some characters, and I think I have a wish list, and I think I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
But you know, we'll talk more about that, you and I, or not.
All right. So speaking, Jen said something of questions. We started off this podcast pretty strong with asking questions at the end of every episode, and I'd like to get back to that, but it got kind of hard as I wasn't, you know, there to like ask a lot of the questions, and a lot of the questions just come up naturally throughout the episode. But I did want to revisit some things that we know have been answered. Things along the lines of like, who are the men looking for the celestial body that entered Jesse? Mm-hmm. We know Fiore and DeBlanc were angels. And that's obviously, that was more important than maybe we even thought in that first episode. We still don't know who killed Jesse's father and why. Well, we know a little bit about it, but not anything at all.
Well, we know that
Jesse's a part of,
somehow tied to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So something happened with that, like he was raised by them or something of that sort.
Right.
But you know.
Now we know for sure. Now,
yeah.
I thought we would know before, and now we definitely know who it is, and it's pretty good.
Okay,
I think it's going to be awesome.
So, is that tattoo not a thing in the books, or was it kind of, or was it a different tattoo, or
which tattoo? The tattoo on Jesse's back?
The skull with the gear that's on the dude shooting John as well as Jesse's back.
Yeah,
I mean that's probably a cue for the TV show.
Yeah, it signifies. It is sort of in the book in what it signifies, but that exact, you know, icon
not that. Okay,
not.
All right, interesting. How did Eugene / Arseface end up that way? We figured that out in the next episode, and that he tried to commit suicide via shotgun. But then we learned even more about it later on in the season, as how he went to go kill Tracy.
Right,
kind of failed, somewhat failed at it, and then tried to kill himself. Who's the cowboy in 1881, and how is this relevant to present day? That question definitely got answered by the end of the season. And that's one of the things, they haven't called him the Saint of Killers in the show.
No,
but all the.
I think people are just so excited that they just want to be like, okay, it's him, it's Saint Killers.
Well, yeah, that was, and they're like on the Preacher Twitter account and stuff like that. They're calling him the Saint of Kill. Like that episode, the episode where I think it was episode 9.
Yeah.
Where
they meet him at
where,
the end.
Yeah, where they finally show that he's in hell.
Right.
And when they tweeted out the photo of that on the AMC Preacher account, they're like, when the Saint of Killers tells you to do something, you do it. And it was a shot of him like shooting at DeBlanc, I think.
Right.
I will say, I just want to say that again, that I think that representation of hell was so well done.
It's a very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the weird thing to me, the only like kind of question that I had about it is that to me is a depiction of purgatory and not necessarily hell.
Mm-hmm.
As like somebody who was brought up in the Catholic religion. So I don't know. Purgatory isn't supposed to be hell. It's between heaven and hell, you know?
Right.
And that kind of reliving being stuck in purgatory to me,
But
like,
this
I don't
is
know.
his own personal hell.
That makes sense, but I don't know. It just seems it's a weird.
I see what you're saying for sure. I like the notion that I don't like the notion, but I'm intrigued by the idea that hell is tailored. You know, it's a personal experience, and it's different for everybody. I think that's pretty haunting. And
yeah, that's interesting. And I guess playing that against the way that Jesse's Figment of Eugene talked about it being crowded, and that you do see other people there. So I guess that's kind of interesting in that maybe the hell is really tailor-made, or maybe just for the saint. Like maybe he's so terrible that he's got his own hell.
That is actually a pretty fair.
So who knows?
The Saint of Killer. It's interesting because the Saint of Killer's origin, which they will probably explain a little bit more. Not his origin, but what happens to him after he dies, and what basically between his death and when Fiora and DeBlanc come to see him is not. There's a lot yet to be told about.
Interesting.
Him.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Part of the reason he can do what he does, and it's. I hope that we do actually get that. I hope a character explains to Jesse who he is, what he does, and why he is, because it's such a cool bit, and I feel like the characters need to really understand who they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Because their reactions henceforth when they run into him will be appropriate, because it's kind of that way when you're reading the book. When the Saint of Killer shows up, you go, ooh, when you sit forward in your chair and you go, here we go. Like something's going to happen. He's one of those characters that, you know, because you understand, and so the stakes. I think I guess what I'm saying is I would rather it not be one of those forces where the characters aren't in the know. I would like the audience and the characters to be on the same page when dealing with him, because it'll be much more fun to watch.
Interesting. All right. More questions about what were the strange men trying to do. Jesse, they wanted Fiora and DeBlanc wanted Genesis, obviously. Why did Eugene / Arseface try to commit suicide? We know that. What's up with Quincannon meeting power? Why are they taking farmland from small-time farmers, and how will they end up interacting with Jesse? Some of that gets answered, but I still kind of like. I'm still a little bit of fuzzy about how.
Me said it, I'm fuzzy.
Jar Jar's on the podcast this week. I'm still a little fuzzy. I'm a little fuzzy about why Quincannon was like. Maybe that's part of his like feeling guilty about not doing enough, is that he's fending off all these small time who cares people instead of killing the Green Acre group. Like, I don't know if I'm being eloquent enough, but he talks about how he tells Jesse about how he's done a bad thing, and that bad thing is not going to the extremes that his grandfather and father went to expand the company.
Right.
And so
they
maybe
weren't producing as much. He wasn't producing as much as
yeah. So maybe his like ousting of the tiny guys was just showing that he's more ineffectual than what they were at the time, and then him killing Green Acre Group is kind of his. I can stand among my ancestors, kind of
serving his god.
Yeah.
But I think he's also kind of being a little bit of a bully. And like solidifying his standing
little
in
man
town
syndrome. That's right. He's got to stand on the
being
desk
at least the biggest game in town, if not the biggest game in Texas. You
that
know,
makes sense too.
He just wants to further his stranglehold on Anvil because he is angry at Anvil.
Yep. When will Cass tell Jesse about the strange men trying to kill him? He didn't outright do that, but he did talk to them about Fiora. Talk to Jesse about Fiora and DeBlanc. Who is Carlos? We got to meet Carlos. That was
fine.
Yeah. kind of perfunctory.
I thought
as
it was
said.
there was one artist named Carlos, so I thought it was a little nod to him. One artist in the book named Carlos.
Oh, really?
That did the
Some of the panels.
yeah. So I thought that was a little nod to him, but it didn't turn out to be as good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carlos was kind of take it or leave it. Yeah, and then I don't know. There were a bunch of other questions that came up in the show that after that we didn't quite document as clearly. So that's something I want to get back to when Gone to Texas returns for season 2 of Preacher. But
I think the show did a good job overall answering. The questions
we've got some seeds. I guess the only other one that I probably missed in here, I don't know, maybe that happened in episode 4. Something you guys, I think, have touched on already in this episode. The man in the white suit with the white hat, obviously, that Danny took the map that Tulip stole. All that is still out there.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to learn more about that. John, did you even remember that happened?
It was episode 3?
Yeah.
It's around
okay.
there.
In
2 or 3?
Houston.
In Houston, yeah.
Yeah, super brief, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
He's at the Snuff Film
Yeah, that's really good.
Festival or whatever.
That is actually that is awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Oh man, I can't wait.
so I guess it's really that and Jesse's past are kind of the two bigger question marks, and I guess more about the Saint.
Yes.
But are there any other things that we want to talk about?
I think the other big question, probably, hopefully for viewers, is what's the situation in heaven right now? Like
What's actually going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last episode kind of opens that up with the video of God. Like their poor telecommunications. I think that, like, definitely, like, after seeing that scene specifically, I was just like, man, like, what is going on up there? Like, for real.
And it's cool because they don't know either.
Yeah.
And in the books, they know. Like, they understand the situation, but there's like a power vacuum going on up there where people are trying to decide who's going to take over temporarily. And that's like I've said a bunch of times, you don't get too much into the angel stuff in the books. It's kind of early on, and then it mostly just kind of fades away. But it's kind of an interesting thing, and they may explore it a little bit more. They may show a little bit more of the situation upstairs. But I thought that was interesting. An interesting way to leave the series, because Jesse, his whole goal at the end of season 1 is figure out what the situation is. Find God, and if he wants help, we'll help him, and if not, we'll kick his ass. And so Jesse seems to think he just because he's not in heaven
doesn't mean he's abandoned.
That maybe he's in trouble. He seems to think like God's in trouble. And but he seems to think he's reachable by them. So Jesse seems to kind of already think he's on Earth.
Yeah,
it's such a cool concept that you find God. When people talk about that, I'm going to find God or I'm going to be saved. It's like it's a personal thing. But Jesse's like, no, I'm going to go.
He's literally finding God.
Physically finding.
Yeah.
I just wonder why Jesse seems to think or know that God is on Earth, because in the show
America
they don't really say that. Yeah, exactly. Whereas in the book it's very clear. It's like, hey, God's on Earth right now. And so I wonder, I mean, they pretty much said that in the Insider podcast that that's what they were going to do, like that. But it was never really laid out in the show, so it's kind of strange. I wonder if they forgot.
Tipped their hand or something, or
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. That'll be interesting to see. Like, it'll be very interesting to be like, because I think at some point somebody in that last scene is like, where are we going to look first? Like, where are we going to go? And I can't remember exactly what they say about it, but it just kind of seems like, what's Jesse's methodology for how do you track down someone who doesn't want to be tracked down,
right? Or potentially can't be.
Yeah.
It is. I just love where the three characters leave it. Where Cassidy's like, "Oh my god, I'm so in." He's like, oh, so excited. He's like, "What? This is a great story. No matter what happens, I'm gonna love it."
Yeah.
And Tulip's more. Why is Tulip along for the ride? I forgot already in the finale what her reasoning is.
I think she just realizes that it's she's. The way that she phrases the question of something of like, so we're just going to go along, do bad things to people, and like the way that she says it, it sounds like they're back to their old ways.
Yeah, and I mean, also, if you were that close to Jesse and you had the opportunity to go along for this journey, I think you would not be able to say no.
Yeah.
Like you you would have to go.
Tulip and Jesse clearly have like a
Right.
like if she came back at the point that she did in season 1, then it's not like he can shake her.
Right.
So
True.
It's a wonderful thing that they did at the end with how he kissed her
yeah,
and she punched him right in the face.
yeah,
Because he's always doing that in the book. He's always pissing her off. So it was very good. And it's almost taken from a panel in the book, if you remember.
Yeah, early on.
Yeah. And then to kind of like do the punch in the face, which is like a little punch in the face to the audience, it's kind of saying, okay, not the same as the book, okay? you know, it's really good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They did a lot of like meta commentary on the way that they feel about the show. Even the way I said last week about Jesse talking about the shite ending of The Big Lebowski as the season's coming to a close. I thought that was a fun tongue in cheek kind of like.
That was funny.
But any other thoughts, questions, anything before we wrap up for probably a full year, almost a full year?
13 episodes for season 2.
Yeah.
So
A little more room to play.
Yeah.
Hopefully a little more money to play with too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
I want some more action. I
Yeah.
think I would like some more action.
I think we'll probably see some pretty good like bar fights with
Yeah.
There's a lot of those in the comic, and they're
Yeah.
so fun. Like just Jesse and Cassidy just dismembering a bar in like just rural Texas. It's really fun to watch the two of them, and they're great. I mean, I'm excited for more of the like bro out between Jesse and I guess beyond that even I'm excited to see the dynamic between the three.
Yeah.
Because Tulip will get jealous of Jesse and Cassidy's relationship, and Cassidy will be jealous of Tulip and Jesse's relationship, and that's going to be fun to watch unfold. And they've already kind of accelerated that drama, so it's going to be good. There's a lot. I have a lot of questions. I probably have more questions than the two of you, which is really
Yeah.
Yeah, but your questions are spoilery-ish.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to ask it. I'm so curious where they're going to go. I know they have so much wonderful material to draw from.
I did want to give a shout out. I managed to, for some reason, I didn't get the notification on the Twitter. I gotta make sure that that's properly set up. But I think a few episodes ago, like quite a while ago, we asked if people wanted us discussing more openly about the comic, and then Aaron wrote us and said, I have not read the comics, do not plan to read them, and really enjoy the podcast the way it is. And that was like back in the middle of June or something like that. So thanks, Aaron, for listening.
Yes. I don't think we're going to deviate.
We'll continue the format the way that we're going. I will not read any Preacher. Don't worry. I don't read things anyway. So I don't know how to read. But yeah.
But you sure know how to watch.
Yep. Any other thoughts? Or is
Nope.
that it?
That's it. That's all
Thanks
I got.
to the listeners for sure.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. I look at the breakdown of our listeners, and we actually have more listeners in California than we do in Michigan.
Interesting.
So
All right.
that's pretty cool.
Step your game up, Midwest.
Thank
How many
you,
in
California
Texas?
guys? Let's take a look right now. That's the important thing, isn't it?
0.
But
How many in Ohio?
well,
We make
they're
a lot
all
of
gone
Ohio jokes.
after the Ohio jokes that we make. Although that's mostly on
That's
film nerds.
Game Nerds.
Yeah.
Game Nerds is pretty Ohio bash. Not Ohio bash is in a party. That was
just that last episode, I think. We
that was
really
pretty funny.
kind of laid into it for a second there.
There will never be a Gone to Ohio podcast of any kind
All right.
It'll be the Drew Carey podcast.
by anyone. Hey, I would actually listen to that.
So Ohio's like smack dab in the middle, pretty much. Texas is the third highest.
Oh, that's cool.
Might just be people searching for
Searching.
Texas on iTunes and being like, "Oh, what's this one?"
These guys travel around
There's-
Texas and
there's-
talk about it.
There's also another podcast called "Gone to Texas"
saw that
talking
one.
about Preacher.
Is there really?
Yes, there is. But
Thieves.
I hope
They didn't make a sweet graphic though.
she
did not.
apparently no. Our graphic is way cooler. Hers is just like a picture of Jesse
Texas?
from the comic.
Suck it.
Yeah, it's just a picture of Texas.
It's actually like a food travel podcast.
No, it's interesting. I listened to the first couple minutes of it, and she talks about how she wanted to start it from like ever since she heard Preacher was being adapted. She wanted to start it, and she had a Twitter account specifically for. So she probably has @Gone to Texas, but she apparently forgot the password to it and doesn't know what it is. So anyway, I don't know if you're listening, but hey, podcast buddy, I don't know, but anyway.
You guys are like Eskimo brothers.
Yeah, I guess we've had one download each in Montana, West Virginia, and South Carolina. And then there's
So
apparently
we reached the population of Montana. That's great.
just only one though.
Yeah.
Only one.
Well, we'll try to expand our reach in the.
Tell your friends.
Yeah, everybody, please tell your friends, especially as they pick up Preacher in the off season.
Rate and review.
I'm sure there's people still looking into it. Please rate and review us on iTunes and Stitcher and all those other platforms, because the more you rate and review us, the more likely other people will find us. If we look like we're a highly rated podcast, then that tends to draw some eyes, or ears in this case.
Yep.
Or both.
So-
Look at our sweet graphic.
Yeah, check out our sweet album art.
And I think our second season will potentially be, I don't want to say better, but more interesting maybe if they start to follow. I mean, now it seems like they're going to start following the comics a lot more. So not necessarily, I mean, we can't spoil anything, but I think that the discussion could potentially be even more interesting with like what they're choosing to do and how maybe Lance and I or other readers of the material may react to some of the choices they make.
Yeah, so that'll be very interesting to see. But
can't wait.
All right. Once again, you can find more episodes of our podcast on g2tpodcast.com. That's the letter G, number 2, letter T podcast.com. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music, so check us out there if you haven't already. We're G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can also email g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on AMC's Preachers so we can read them on air. Send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Preacher or our podcast. Love to hear from you in the off season. Let us know what's going on. And if you're just getting to the season wrap up and it's the beginning of season 2 tomorrow, please listen to us for season 2. If you want to hear Nick and I and some of our friends talk about movies, please check out the Midwest Film Nerds podcast at midwestfilmnerds.com. This week we're going to talk about Suicide Squad, directed by David Ayer. It's going to be a good one. I'm excited. And then the Midwest Podcast Network also has a video game podcast hosted by John here.
That's me.
Called the Midwest Game Nerds Podcast. Check that out at midwestgamenerds.com. Right now we're giving away video games.
Yeah, we're in like the very giving mood. We're giving away Hyper Light Drifter.
Right now.
And there's debate of giving away a copy of No Man's Sky.
It might even be a limited edition of No Man's Sky.
So stay tuned for that, because the next episode will be the No Man's Sky review, and we'll hopefully have all the details of the contest hashed out at that point.
Yeah. And then, that's about it. Our theme music is the song All In by The Red Thread, and it is being used under a non-commercial Creative Commons license. But that's about it. Go forth and speak the good word.
Yep.